Hey everybody, happy Monday. You see this? I've bought Assassin's Creed Odyssey and by request, so your Patreon dollars paid for this game. You know it's coming now. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. I picked up this game because you guys on the YouTube channel suggested it. I chucked it over to the patrons because they have final word because they pay me money to buy games. And they said, yeah, go for it. They're interested in my take on the female character because apparently Ubisoft has said the female character is the default experience even though it's only the man on the box. They've made the Mass Effect mistake. So more on that later. But yeah, I'll be playing through it. I'll do hi Scouty, Scout's up on the window there. But I'll be playing through it during the week in part because it's by request. To oh my god, it's been so long since I played a AAA game. I've just been playing RimWorld in part because my capture card got lost in the shuffle. I've got one of those external Elgatos because I refused to put Uplay on my PC. It bunged it up so badly I had to take it off, and so I just play it on console. It solves the problem. I love the Uplay points. I love the whole system. I love the little in-game extras you get, but my PC does not like Uplay. So I had to find my external capture card to play on vanilla PS4. Someday I will get one of the swanky next gen PS4s. Probably not. I'll just wait for the next PlayStation because I don't make enough Patreon money to pay for that. But shameless plug again. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Yes, your Patreon bucks are the reason I'm allowed to be this giddy. I don't even know what that means. It was a very long day yesterday. We had to be out of the house by 10 o'clock because of home showings to sell the place. And we were driving Loki all the way about 40 minutes north because we were scouting out where we're hoping to move to. This week is going to be the moment of truth about the new place. More on that later. But Loki played Pokemon Go, which is what I call his requirement that he pees everywhere he goes. He's a boy dog. We've had girl dogs before this. I was not prepared for the leg lifting, and it kind of freaks me out. So I call it Pokemon Go because you know how it's like augmented reality Pokemon Go. Well, I imagine that's how Loki sees the world, and he's just peeing on Pokemon because that's how he collects them. Somebody's going to make a game of that someday. Anyway, not what I'm talking about today. Yes, this Assassin's Creed Odyssey will be the rest of the week. I haven't played Origins yet, so I bought this too used. You'll see the big used sticker on it. Yeah, I had a gift card, and I bought a used game, so it was pretty much free for me. Yeah, because that's what I can afford right now with house stuff. Yeah, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is by request. Patron suggested that I look at this article, and again, patrons go to the front of the line, but this one was actually really interesting. The more I looked at it, the more I realized it's not just going to be a roast, which is funny and all, but I always feel kind of dirty after I just cut up someone's work just to do it. But I think there's actually something teachable here, which is why I wanna look at it. It is, surprise, surprise, about The Witcher, specifically The Witcher 3. And you'll see the title. It's kind of small. The layout on this website isn't so great. But the problem with transactional sex in open world games. Now, before I get into this, I know you're all going, groan. The reason I decided to take a look at this article is precisely because this is the problem. This is from a website called First Person Scholar. And this analysis is my big issue with the way academia handles games. And the way academia handles games is, in order to research and write papers about games, you require citations. Because there are no, third-party sources. First party is the actual text. Third party is people writing about the text. Because there are very few third-party sources in games, people borrow film, mass communication, and media criticism theories. And the results are terrible because they treat these games like television shows or movies or novels where the ending is preset. There's no player choice. And this is a problem. I actually just did my first brand new lecture at Sheridan College. I'm a guest lecturer at a second year game design course. And I used to be the one that when it talked about gender as systems, so it being, a dynamic system within the games, and I call it accidental sexism in game design, to kind of let people know that no, you're not going to be under attack in this course, because of course it's a lot more guys than women. But the prof was like, I feel kind of awkward that the female lecturer is coming in and doing gender. Do you have anything else? And I'm like, well, I have my agency talk. And that's the triangle of agency thing you saw in Lady Bits, where it's like player agency, character agency, and developer agency, and they all work together. Well, this is what this article fails to take into account. Now, there are some really obvious biases that come across at the snark off the top. Right from the second sentence, I was like, huh? You'll see sex in video games has come a long way. He's obviously a very clear scholar of the FAP in video games. So he clearly has a long track record. Comparing the groan-inducing humor of Leisure Suit Larry, humor is now sex. There's almost no sex in Leisure Suit Larry. There's boobies at one point, and there's a couple of, cartoon sexy times where you really don't see anything. There's literally a censored bar across the so-called sexual encounters. But all right, you're showing surface awareness of subject matter, but then it fails horribly. Or the meta goofiness of Tomb Raider 2. Right here, you'll see. And I was like, sex in Tomb Raider 2? I just went and replayed Tomb Raider 2 for the Lady Bits episode, and I don't remember any sex in Tomb Raider 2. So there's a link. So let me show you what it goes to on the link. Here we go. Whoops. Wait a minute. It's the shower scene in Tomb Raider 2.
Don't you think you've seen enough?
That is not sex. That is not sex. If that is sex to the person writing this article, this person needs to get out more. That is voyeurism. Certainly, one could say that is a display of player proxy sexuality, but that is not sex. She's taking a shower. The whole point is it was innocent. Yes, they called it meta goofiness, but don't forget, they are not saying sexualized comedy. This author is saying sex in video games. There is no sex in Tomb Raider games. None. Nada. It's not there. That's one of the things about Lara Croft that I think is really interesting, is for somebody who's such a sex symbol, there is a profound lack of sex in Tomb Raider games. But then they talk about the games that, it's a he, I'm sure. I'm just being so careful now. But the more nuanced romance in modern games like Dream Daddy, Sybil, or To the Moon, bias declared, right? Talking about very different games here. I'm not going to get into my attitude about romance in Dream Daddy. I think it's just as idealized, and not getting into it. But you can see this author's bias right off the top, right? They think that games with mass appeal are immediately junk, And these indie games with a smaller player base, oh, they're refined. That's for refined taste. It's like, people who only see films, they don't see movies. This is the bias that comes from film theory. The people who are really mad that The Lord of the Rings swept the Oscars one year, yeah, those types. This is like the video game equivalent. And to me, this automatically causes a problem because they have a very clear bias about what they think is quality in games. And these games, these smaller games, tend to have a lot of narrative choice, but they don't have a lot of choice through the gameplay because they don't have the budget to do really deep, involved gameplay. So we have an author who is studying games with a very large narrative analysis bias, which is a problem because people who are all about the story and character tend to neglect the actual core gameplay elements, the stuff that in a AAA game is designed to feel intuitive so schmucks with film degrees don't notice it. I'm going to try to avoid that sort of thing, but it's difficult because there's a line. You can read the whole article if you want. This is all introduction. This has nothing. It says that they're going to talk about the fact that in video games, sex is purely transactional. And this is the first thing that pissed me off, okay? Video games are no different to cheesy camp movies from the 90s. And open world games in particular have a tendency to treat sex as purely transactional. Obviously, this must change at any time, but especially during this moment of reckoning in the wake of the Me Too movement. Can you guess the problem I have with this? Me Too is not about transactional sex. Me Too is about sexual assault. Consensual transactional sex and non-consensual sexual assault are not the same thing. And, the free love movement that started to dovetail, the core free love movement was not feminist. But then the second wave feminists of the 1970s found a way to create a feminist free love consciousness. And one of those consciousness things was the fact that women absolutely have the right to have transactional sex if they so choose. You don't have to be in love to have sex. Why? Because men don't. And so if it's equal, then we can't be criticizing transactional heterosexual sexual encounters because there's a double standard. Also, if you're going to criticize transactional sex, that automatically makes you anti-sex work. And that puts you, not completely, because there are some sex-positive feminists who still oppose sex work because of the exploitation and human trafficking elements. I'm not one of them. I think trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation and consensual domestic sex work are different things, even though there is a connection in the real world. But transactional sex is at the core of the world's oldest profession, that is prostitution. And yes, it's very divisive in feminism, the idea of prostitution, but this person seems from the outset to be leaning anti-sex, making them a poor candidate to tackle the entire concept of transactional sex. Because the only reason that transactional sex in video games is bad is if transactional sex is bad, unless he's arguing, or they're arguing, I'm assuming it's a he. Wait, what pronoun? He does say he, so I can use that pronoun. Okay. Unless his argument is that the lack of the potential for romantic sex and love intertwined in video games, unless he's arguing that, but he's not, he's comparing, he's fusing consensual transactional sex and sexual assault right off the bat. Houston, we have a problematic right off the bat. I just made that up. That's pretty clever. But let's move on. There's something else that really made me mad and really made me question not only the wokeness, but also the actual awareness of subject matter and professional detachment of this author. And that while he's talking about The Witcher 3, he makes fun of Yennefer's name. Where is it? Let me find this thing. There we go. Here we are. Triss Marigold is one of the longtime female leads of the Witcher series, and to woo her, you not only do you have to complete a bunch of quests, because of course, well, it's a video game. I'll catch myself. You also have to choose correct dialogue options that involve beyond, yes, I'd like to have sex now, please. So he's mocking the entire idea of Triss's in-game agency, where yes, there is a right or wrong answer to get her to consent, because she has agency and she can choose whether or not to sleep with you. Keep in mind, this complaint, this snark, is in the middle of complaining about transactional sex in video games. So now not only is he complaining about transactional sex in video games, he's also complaining about a character who herself has agency that requires the character to choose the options that she considers correct in order to get her to consent to sex. Houston, we have another problematic, but it goes on. Yes, during a dockside farewell scene, similar to the end of Casablanca, no, the player must select 4 correct responses to earn, in quotes. The guy invokes Me Too and sneers at earning a sexual encounter with a woman you have known for years. That silence you hear is me. This is the problem with faux feminists co-opting things like Me Too. They don't get it. This guy doesn't get it. He's mocking the idea that yes, you do have to earn a woman's consent and a man's consent. And that is a wonderful, amazing thing that if you come at it from a sex positive approach is part of the fun of sex. It's cooler because you've earned it, because it took a little bit of work and you have a bond and you have things in common. Yes, you have to earn it. You can't come into it from a position of, in this case, just because the author of this piece is male entitlement. I'm not saying that some women don't feel like they're entitled to sex with certain people. That does happen. But in this case, this is an attitude of male entitlement, mocking the idea of actually having to earn consent. I don't know where this guy is coming from now. Before, in an act of subtle yet very real misogyny and cultural arrogance, the thing I talked about before, that the game even briefly acknowledges that sometimes sex is about more than simply fulfilling rote requests feels like a minor revelation. But even this tepid excitement is dashed when you compare it with the other major romantic option, the ridiculously named Yennefer. Ridiculously named Yennefer. This is cultural insensitivity. Could you imagine, a test we do to see if something actually passes muster is we flip it to something else to see how it sounds. Now, could you imagine if someone writing in 2018 referred to a female character as the ridiculously named Shaniqua? Racist, right? The ridiculously named T'Challa. Racist, right? It's African names. Well, Yennefer, I have it right here. Yennefer is not a ridiculous name. It is the Polish version of Jennifer, which is Welsh. It is just the same way Estevan is the same as Stephen is the same essentially as Svi. Yennefer is not a ridiculous name. It is a Polish name. It is an Eastern European name. And unfortunately, in Western academia, there tends to be this looking down on the cultures of former Soviet bloc countries because they were oppressed very seriously. Poland has, and I talk about this all the time, Poland has a unique amount of oppression under both the Soviets and the Nazis, the communists and the Nazis. And the thing about Yennefer is the name Yennefer isn't accidental. Yennefer means fair one. And it's a perfect name for the character in The Witcher. And I'm sitting here going, wait a minute. You picked on Yennefer, which is just a straight up Polish name, but not Triss Marigold, which is actually if I understand this correctly, because I don't speak Polish or read Polish, but I understand that Triss Marigold is actually an English approximation of what she's named in the stories. So it sounds a bit better in in Polish, but also you have a male character named Dandelion and you think Yennefer is ridiculous. I mean, I actually thought it was kind of cool that, these hardcore gamers just sort of accepted the dude's name is Dandelion and he dresses like a fop and nobody had a problem with this. Big bad homophobic gamers, right? Like Dandelion's not gay. I think he's a little bit gay for Geralt, but he doesn't express those urges, just follows him around and writes and sings about how great he is. Not gay at all. But he does end up in a very sweet relationship with a woman in The Witcher 3, which of course this article completely ignores. That there's plenty of non-strictly transactional sex in The Witcher 3. And I'd guess that this guy didn't play the first two games, because in the context of the first two games, doing anything but transactional sex for Geralt is a big step. There's this sort of, because in The Witcher 3 you can actually choose to break the sort of soul binding. I get the name wrong, but Yennefer and Geralt are bound by this magical bond based on what happened to them before. Because at the end of the Witcher books, spoiler alert, they die, and the games had to bring him back with amnesia to actually continue the story. And so they have this bond, and the wild hunt is all in The Witcher 3 is all tied up in the opportunity to actually break the bond that Geralt and Yennefer share, allowing them to even have a hope of experiencing each other through consensual love and not just being bound together by some power that neither of them are completely okay with. They actually deal with the fact that neither of them really knows what they want because of this bond between them. And it's actually a really heavy moment where you make this choice to either continue the bond and therefore now it's a choice. So, okay, he's committed. This is not just something I have to do. This is something I want to do. Or they choose to break it because they don't want to be artificially forced together. I don't see how this is transactional, but because of that, yes, any sexual relationship Geralt would have with any other woman to that point would be somewhat transactional, because it's like a marriage you can never get divorced from, but it's not just legal, you are soul bound to each other. And this is a lore point that isn't explored in this article. Now, instead of going through the whole article and one more point I have to make is this author reduces the Geralt, Yennefer, Triss triangle to the virgin whore dichotomy right here. That's inaccurate on multiple levels. Now, it becomes a little less clear in the games because they gave Triss a really extreme makeover. In the book, she's like this mousy brunette, and because she's allergic to magic, she can't hide her scars. So it's not just, it doesn't do it justice to say that Yennefer and Triss are the virgin whore dichotomy. First of all, Triss is not a virgin. Triss is as sexualized a being, as sexual a being. Hello, Momo. Did you hear a bad word and come over to investigate? Come here, Momos. Come on, buddy. Okay, there's the Momos. There's Momos. But yeah, not only is Triss quite sexual all through the games, and even in the books talks about wearing low-cut dresses and things like that. She's no prude. She's no virgin. There's also this juxtaposition that Triss is loyal and steadfast and frankly a better person in terms of straight up, morality. Who's the better partner for Geralt? Like, who's gonna have his back and not put him in hugely dangerous, bad, character destroying situations? Triss is very smart. She ends up as an advisor to kings. I mean, she's stable, right? Like in totally practical terms, she's the smart choice. But Yennefer's exciting. And this is a dichotomy. This is the reason I love this. This is the reason I love this love triangle. That's something you usually see in romantic comedies with a woman and two men, right? That's basically Bridget Jones, right? You've got the exciting Hugh Grant character, and then you've got the Mr. Darcy, who's absolutely not Mr. Darcy, Colin Firth character in the movies. That's basically Yennefer's Hugh Grant and Triss is Colin Firth. That's the triangle, not the virgin whore dichotomy. There is no Madonna whore dichotomy in The Witcher. Furthermore, the Madonna is the idea of the mother. Well, Yennefer is actually the one that is sort of primary in Ciri's life. Triss is sort of getting in where she can, trying not to piss off Yen. And so that's completely reductive. It's completely derivative. It is treating two female characters not as characters in their own right, but slamming these round holes, slamming these round pegs into a square hole. They're treating these women as fungible, which is a marker of objectification, when they're really not. They're far more complex. So again, remember I said part of the problem is awareness of subject matter? Really, really lacking here. But here's the thing. The other stuff this article describes, and I won't, I'll spare you because it actually brings up tropes versus women and women as reward. It does rightly say that transactional sex is an option in The Witcher 3. It is not a requirement. It is not like a movie or a TV show or a novel where you are forced to go along this journey of transactional sex because you can't change the outcome. I played through The Witcher 3, and I thought Geralt treated Triss like shit, and I wanted him to grow up, and so I made him not be an idiot, and I didn't have him sleep with Kara Metz, and I didn't have him do all these, random sexual encounters, and I got like what I thought was one of the sweetest endings in the game where him and Triss, I mean, he basically ends up a kept man and Triss is the one that goes out and works and makes a lot of money and he just stays home and Ciri becomes the Witcher. And I'm like, hashtag feminism in the Northern Kingdoms. What is this? It was such a departure from even it almost breaks canon, but they did it so well that because they had that closure with Geralt and Yen, it actually made sense that, yeah, he can become this completely different person because he's not under some sort of spell. It was brilliant. And then, the Yennefer ending, if you choose her, you can't have both. You can't. Neither of them like it. It's not like Yennefer is totally okay with Geralt sleeping. Yennefer is okay with Geralt sleeping with everyone but Triss, because those are strictly transactional. There's a lot more that goes into Witcher sexuality, the fact that they're sterile, and so women sort of use them as the city bus because they can't get pregnant, they can't get diseases. So, yes, the sex is not just transactional on Geralt's part, it's transactional on the women's part. He's kind of being used, and he's okay with that because what choice does he have? He really can't commit to any woman who's not Yennefer until he deals with that. But it is a choice. And this is the thing, just because the option for transactional sex is available in games, it doesn't mean it's the only option you have. I would actually compare that to Dragon Age Inquisition, where one of my big complaints with the game is if you play as a straight female Tal Vashoth, they call it a Canary, but she's not, it's either Blackwall or purely like sex for the sake of sex with the Iron Bull. There is no romance in those romance options. And I thought that was actually a weakness for that series because that game gives really good romance. Like, you can't say that all open world games are transactional sex if, like, Dragon Age Origins is so much not. Every single one of those, you get so swept up in the storyline. And this is the other criticism that I have of this analysis, that they bring up Dragon Age and they bring up the fact that the dialogue options, they call it, I have it here, although series like Mass Effect and Dragon Age have attempted to complicate this formula by relying on Triss Marigold-style conversations over Yennefer questing to unlock sex, mainstream open-world games still feel so far away from exploring intimacy in any meaningful way. You're not actually having sex in a video game, sir. This is a big point of dissonance, is because you don't feel anything in your body, people know it's not you. The thing this analysis misses is that like 90% of sex is in the mind. Maybe 99% of sex is in the mind. Games are more about sexuality and some sort of emotional buy-in than any physical sexual gratification. They're not real people. And so the whole idea of transactional sex at all is something of a myth. It's, you know, I call character agency in games to a point just a clever imaginative veneer that is put over the rules of a game. You know, Mario wanting to rescue Princess Peach is basically just telling the player the victory condition for the game. It is a rule book told through character and story. But sex and romance in games is very different, because sex and romance in games, you don't need to do it to complete the game. It is, you don't really get anything for it either. You know, in cases like Grand Theft Auto and other games where you have prostitutes. I mean, Grand Theft Auto has a health mechanic. So that's a, you know, one would claim that's more transactional than what The Witcher's doing. The interesting thing about sex and romance in video games is, from a gameplay perspective, you get nothing out of it. The only thing you get out of it is a certain emotional thrill. That is its own form of intimacy, because all you get from it is an emotional payoff. I agree that engaging with prostitutes in Grand Theft Auto for health, that is a transaction. You put money in, you get health out. And the cutscenes with the prostitutes get really tedious after a while, I think. I don't get anything. I mean, they're funny. I like some of the humor in them, but after a while, even that gets old. But that is, straight up from a gameplay perspective, that is transactional. There's a payoff for doing it. But in games like The Witcher, your romance, like, okay, in The Witcher 3, it affects the ending, but that's not the only thing that affects the ending. It is not a victory condition. You may earn an achievement in Dragon Age for various romances, that I find kind of embarrassing to have on Steam accounts and things like that, because it tells you far too much about you. Now it's on Origins, so it's far less embarrassing. Nobody sees that. But I think this is completely backward. I think what this analyst is claiming is transactional sex in video games is actually a really unique form of intimacy between a person and their own desires. Because, like I said, you don't get any sexual gratification from Cullen or Alistair or Liliana or, in Dragon Age or, the various Fallout characters or I don't even do romances in Fallout. It's because it's kind of flat and I'm not interested. And that's the thing. There's no emotional buy-in for me. And an emotional buy-in, I was really invested in Triss and Geralt. And I was really invested in Yennefer and Geralt getting their freedom. And what that managed to make me do is actually care about those two relationships and then the three of them connected. It actually made me care about them in a really complex and interesting and meaningful way, and I ended up liking all of them more because of it. I think Yennefer's a great character, and people are like, well, if you think she's such a great character, why didn't you choose her? Well, because she's terrible for Geralt, and they're better off apart, in my opinion. Somebody else can make a different choice based on their own emotional engagement. They may think that Geralt is tied down. It's not true to his nature by settling down into domestic bliss. The danger, the life on the open road, the never settling down in one place, that's more him. And so Yennefer's a better pairing for him. But that's the whole point of interactivity. Their investment in Geralt, Yen, and Triss is completely different than my investment in Geralt, Yen, and Triss. And that's the player agency that works so incredibly well in The Witcher 3 that didn't work as well in the previous two games, and so the sex did feel very transactional and in some cases for me icky. But that's just a personal thing. I thought it actually handled it very well. I thought The Witcher 3 actually handled the emotional buy-in involving a lot of women. I mean, I cared about Philippa Eilhart. I cared about Ciri. I cared about Kara Metz in her own way, but I found her a bit of a bubblehead, and I admit, I had a different reaction to her flinging herself at Geralt all the time. It's like, come on, lady, I've said no. Like, I've brushed you off like 2 or 3 times. Can ya stop? But that was interesting too, because like me playing as a guy, it's like, enough, and that was my choice. But I didn't sleep with her because I didn't want to sleep with her because it was a completely emotional thing. There's no good reason. There was no penalty per se for doing it, but that's the whole point. The fact that there's no penalty or reward for doing it means it's not transactional at all. A transaction involves a trade of something. It's strictly emotional. And the fact that the developer created so much space for me to have this emotional journey with, let's face it, I haven't named half the female characters in The Witcher 3, and I've already named far more female characters than most games have. So they are taking something that is actually quite pro-women and quite emotional and the opposite of transactional. It, there is no belief that men are entitled to sex, as this article states. It isn't the idea that sex isn't mature in the Witcher game. It's that the player has to be mature enough to engage with the game in a mature way because of the player agency and player choice dynamic that, developers have to choose to give up some of their own agency in terms of how the story goes. There's no definitive ending to allow the player to have agency within the game. So if you come at games from an immature perspective, you're going to get an immature result. If you come at games from a mature perspective, you get the adorable Triss, Geralt, Ciri ending that I got. Maybe that's not mature by some people's, but I loved it. I really liked it. But again, it was sort of a more personal boundaries approach to sex, which I consider more mature, just based on my own personal experience. But that's the whole point of games, that people can have the experience that they not necessarily want, but that they're capable of through their choices. So if this author believes that their experience with The Witcher 3 was immature and transactional. Well, that's because they played the game from an immature transactional point of view. If he played the game as something other than an entitled man with the belief that men are entitled to sex if they spend enough time questing for a woman, and if you watch my Damsels in Distress Ladybits episode, you'll find out that's not what it was about. But he came at it from that perspective, so that's the result he got. And yeah, that's totally what I expect from a guy who reduces complex women to virgins and whores and makes fun of their names and, negates their right to consent, meaning that he actually does have to earn a woman's affection, not just their bodies. I think this author said more about himself than he did The Witcher 3. And I'm going to leave it there because this was already pretty long, but it took that long to get it all out. I think you see why now. If you liked what you heard here, again, help support this channel, become a monthly patron. I know I've plugged this 3 times this time, but this is the stuff that I like doing. This stuff doesn't necessarily get a lot of clicks. So if you like this sort of deep dive content that takes 40 minutes to unpack, please become a patron because that allows me to do it, because just the watch time on this video is going to kill the views. But thanks for watching. Hope you like what you saw. I know that I didn't get to everything, all the nuance with women in the Witcher game. So if you want to add stuff in the comments, there's Polish viewers of this YouTube channel, and they add a lot of really great stuff about The Witcher. So please contribute in the comments. Absolutely love reading additional stuff in the comments because I can't possibly get through everything. There's a lot more depth. Didn't even talk about the Crones or the Bloody Baron or anything like that. That's all, like, it's just this root system in the game. It's so good. I mean, for people who haven't been watching me for a while, I went from absolutely despising The Witcher 3 on this point. I also thought it was a bit of a hot mess as a game, as a giant memory leak that they never fixed, to I wasn't even going to play The Witcher 3 because I hated 2 so much. There were parts I really liked about 2, but overall it left me with a bad taste in my mouth because it was just clunky. But I got The Witcher 3 free with a new video card. And so it was free, so I played it. And I ended up loving it. And now I'm this die-hard defender of the Witcher franchise because 3 just did so many things so right. So that's a little history on me, which made this video even longer. But I love you guys, and I know you love this deep dive stuff. So thanks to the person who suggested this. Great recommendation. Thanks for watching all the way through. Read the article if it's not going to make you too angry, because you'll see a whole bunch of other things. I just did the biggest parts. They compare games to novels at one point and films, and then I'm just like, no. But yeah, I think we can put to bed that there's a lot of flaws. And it's not necessarily that this person is, well, they show clear signs of sexism in their writing, but that could be the junk that their head's been filled with from Marxist comparative lit courses and not necessarily what they truly believe. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but this is why you don't use film theory to analyze video games. Okay, thanks for watching.